a piece of faded cloth. Inside the breast pocket was a small envelope. The paper was brittle and stained with age. The ink had almost disappeared. The envelope had never been opened. The name on the front was written in careful handwriting. Anna Keller. The letter was dated November 1944. At first, the workers thought it was just another forgotten family document. But when local historians examined the uniform, they discovered that it had belonged to a German infantry soldier who had officially been listed as missing during the final months of the Second World War. The strange part was not that the letter existed. The strange part was that it had never been delivered. And when researchers finally tracked down Anna's family, they learned that she had spent the rest of her life waiting for a message that never came. This is the story of a letter that arrived 78 years too late. To understand why that letter mattered, we have to go back to a very different Europe. The year was 1944. The war had entered its darkest phase. Cities were burning. Railway stations were crowded with soldiers and refugees. Families were separated by hundreds of miles. For millions of people, letters were the only connection between the front and home. A single envelope could carry hope, or fear, or a goodbye that would arrive too late. Military mail was unpredictable. Trains were bombed, roads were destroyed. Entire postal routes disappeared as front lines shifted across Europe. Thousands of letters were delayed. Some were lost forever. Others were buried under rubble, and a few remained hidden in places where no one would look for generations. The letter found in the wall was only 4 pages long, but those 4 pages would eventually reveal the final weeks of one man's life. The soldier's name was Lucas Keller. He was 26 years old. Before the war, he had worked as a school teacher in a small town near the Black Forest. He was known for collecting old books, repairing clocks, and taking long walks through the forest after work. Friends later described him as unusually quiet, not shy, just thoughtful. He believed that every object had a story: a broken watch, a faded photograph, an old coin. He kept them all. In the summer of 1939, he became engaged to Anna. They planned to marry the following spring.
They had already chosen a small church. Anna had begun sewing her wedding dress. Then the war began. Lucas was drafted within weeks to T1st. Everyone believed he would return quickly. The war was expected to be short, IT was not.
Years passed. The wedding never happened. Instead, they exchanged letters, hundreds of them. Some arrived in days, others took months. Several disappeared completely. Anna kept every letter she received. She tied them together with blue ribbon and stored them in a wooden box beneath her bed. When bombs fell nearby, she carried the box to the cellar. When food became scarce, she sold jewelry and furniture. But she never sold the letters. Lucas wrote about ordinary things: the weather, the trees, a stray dog that followed his unit, the taste of black bread. He rarely described combat directly. Like many soldiers, he tried to protect the people he loved from the reality of the front. But between the lines, the truth was visible. His handwriting became smaller. His sentences became shorter. The cheerful jokes disappeared. One letter contained only a single sentence: "I dream about home every night." That was all. In October 1944, Lucas's unit was transferred to the Eastern Front. The retreat had already begun. Supplies were running out. Fuel was scarce. Entire divisions were moving westward under constant artillery fire. Historians later described those months as a collapse rather than a campaign. Young soldiers were being sent into impossible situations. Many units disappeared from official records. Lucas continued writing. His last confirmed letter reached Anna in early November. He told her that winter was coming. He asked whether the apple tree behind the school had survived the storms. He wondered if children were still attending classes. Then the letters stopped. Anna waited. She visited the post office every week. She asked neighbors if they had received news from the front. She wrote letters that were never answered. Months later, the army informed her that Lucas was missing in action. Missing. Not dead, not alive. just missing. For families, that word was often the cruelest of all, because missing meant hope could not die, not completely. For decades, Anna believed that Lucas had tried to come home. She imagined him injured somewhere, captured, lost, perhaps unable to write. She never remarried. She continued living in the same house. Every Christmas, she placed one extra candle near the window. Neighbors thought it was a tradition. In reality, it was a signal, a light for someone who might still find his way home. When she died in 1998, the wooden box of letters was found beneath her bed exactly where she had left it. But one letter was missing, the final one. The letter discovered inside the wall, and what it contained would force historians to ask a question no one had considered before. What if Lucas had never intended to send it at all? What if he had hidden it deliberately? That question would change everything. When historians carefully unfolded the final letter, they expected a farewell message. Instead, they found something far more unsettling. The first page was calm. Lucas wrote about the weather, the cold nights, and the sound of distant artillery. He apologized for not writing sooner and asked whether Anna still kept the small blue ribbon she used to wear in her hair. Then the tone changed. He wrote that he had been ordered to move through a village that no longer appeared on military maps. The roads were damaged, the bridges had been destroyed, and several soldiers had disappeared during the retreat. He mentioned a farmhouse, an empty house with broken windows. He wrote that they had been told to rest there for one night before moving west. That farmhouse was located less than 20 kilometers from the building where the letter was eventually discovered. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. The second page contained details that no military record had preserved. Lucas described a group of exhausted soldiers who had been marching for days with almost no food. He wrote that they were no longer talking about victory. They were talking about survival. One man had frozen fingers. Another had lost his boots. A third carried a photograph of his daughter and looked at it every evening before sleeping. Lucas admitted that he no longer believed he would return home, but he still believed that the letter might. That sentence appeared underlined. If I cannot come back, perhaps these words can. Researchers later noticed that the handwriting became uneven, as if he had been writing in great haste. The ink was darker in some places and almost faded in others. It was likely written over several days. On the third page, Lucas described something that historians still debate. He wrote that his unit had received orders that made no sense. They were told to hold a position that had already been abandoned by neighboring forces. Communication had collapsed. Maps were outdated. Officers disagreed about where the front line actually was. At one point, they spent an entire night listening to artillery from both directions. Lucas wrote that they no longer knew who controlled the roads. He described hearing voices outside the farmhouse after midnight. No footsteps, just voices. German, Russian, and sometimes neither. He wrote that war had become a place where no one knew which direction was home. That sentence has often been quoted by historians because it captured the confusion of the final months of the war better than many official reports. The final page was different. It was not a report. It was not a diary. It was a confession. Lucas admitted that he had hidden the letter inside the wall of the farmhouse. He wrote that a messenger had been killed on the road. The postal route no longer existed. He believed the building would eventually be destroyed, but he also believed that walls could survive longer than people. He wrote that if anyone ever found the letter, he hoped they would send it to Anna. Then came the final paragraph. Anna, if this reaches you, it means time has done what I could not. Do not wait for me. Live, marry, grow old. And when you hear the church bells, remember only the summer before the war. I have carried that summer with me every day. That was the end of the letter. There was no signature, only the date. November 23rd, 1944. For decades, military historians had assumed that Lucas disappeared during a retreat in late November. The letter suggested something else. It suggested that he expected to die before dawn. That realization led researchers to examine old battlefield records from the area around the farmhouse. Most documents had been destroyed. But one forgotten report mentioned a small group of soldiers who were cut off during a night attack and never recovered. The location matched the farmhouse almost exactly. There were no names, only numbers. For the first time, historians could place Lucas within a specific event rather than a general disappearance. But one mystery remained. If he had hidden the letter himself, why was the uniform still inside the wall? The answer came from the renovation itself. Behind the wall, workers had also found a small metal box. Inside were military buttons, a broken wristwatch, and a pair of spectacles. The watch had stopped at 3:17. At first, people assumed it marked the time of his death. Later, experts disagreed. Mechanical watches often stopped days later, but the objects suggested that someone had intentionally hidden personal belongings. Perhaps Lucas, perhaps someone else. One theory proposed that another soldier had survived the attack and concealed the uniform and the letter before escaping. Another theory suggested that a local civilian had found the body and hidden everything to avoid punishment from occupying forces. There was no proof, only silence. The wall had protected its secret for nearly 8 decades. When Anna's surviving relatives read the letter, they were shocked by one detail above all others. Lucas had told her not to wait, but she had waited for the rest of her life. She had kept the candle in the window. She had kept the letters. She had kept the house. She had kept the memory of a man who had already accepted that he would never return. The letter had not arrived too late for history. It had arrived too late for the only person who needed to read it. And yet, in a strange way, it still completed a conversation that had remained unfinished for 78 years. But the story was not over, because investigators soon discovered that the farmhouse had another hidden compartment, and what they found inside would reveal the final hours of Lucas Keller. The hidden compartment was discovered almost by accident. One of the workers noticed that a section of the floor beneath the staircase sounded hollow. When the old wooden boards were removed, they uncovered a narrow space no larger than a suitcase. Inside was another bundle wrapped in cloth. This time it was not a uniform. It was a notebook. Its pages were damaged by moisture and many entries were impossible to read, but several dates remained visible. The handwriting did not belong to Lucas. It belonged to another soldier. His name appeared only once: Ernst Bauer. The notebook described the same farmhouse, the same winter, the same retreat, and the same night. Ernst wrote that a small group of soldiers had become trapped after a bridge was destroyed. They had no radio, almost no ammunition, and very little food. For 2 days they remained hidden inside the farmhouse while artillery echoed across the surrounding fields. They knew that moving during daylight meant almost certain death. At night they listened for footsteps outside. Sometimes they heard voices, sometimes gunfire, sometimes only the wind. Lucas spent most of his time writing. Ernst described him sitting near a broken window, using a small candle to finish a letter. He wrote that Lucas folded the pages carefully, sealed the envelope, and searched the room for a place where it might survive. He chose the wall beside the fireplace. Then he smiled for the first time in weeks. According to Ernst, Lucas believed that buildings could outlive wars. He said that armies passed through villages like storms, but houses remained. Someone would repair them, children would play there again, families would live there, and perhaps one day a wall would be opened. It was a strange kind of hope. Not hope for survival, hope for remembrance. Ernst admitted that he thought Lucas was being unrealistic. No one would find a letter hidden in a farmhouse wall. No one would know who had written it. No one would care. History would move on. Lucas answered with a sentence that Ernst copied into his notebook. If one person remembers, then I have not completely disappeared. The final entries were written during the night of November 24th. Heavy fighting had reached the village. The soldiers attempted to escape through the forest before dawn. Ernst wrote that they left the farmhouse in silence. Snow had begun to fall. Visibility was poor. Within minutes they came under fire. The group scattered. He never saw Lucas again. The notebook ended abruptly. No conclusion. No explanation. Only a final, unfinished sentence. I think he turned back. Turned back. Those two words changed the entire story. Historians began asking the obvious question. Why would Lucas return to the farmhouse? One possibility was that he returned for the letter. Perhaps he wanted to move it. Perhaps he wanted to hide it more carefully. Or perhaps he simply wanted to make sure it would survive. No one could know. But the discovery of the notebook revealed something important. Lucas had not vanished into a faceless battlefield. He had been remembered by another human being. For decades, Ernst's notebook remained hidden beneath the same farmhouse that protected the letter. Two voices, separated by wood, dust, and time, waiting for someone to listen. The story attracted attention across Europe. Journalists called it a miracle. Historians called it an extraordinary archival discovery. But for Anna's family, it was something much simpler. Closure. They finally knew that Lucas had thought about home until the very end. He had not disappeared without a trace. He had left words, intentional words, for a woman who never stopped waiting. When the family visited the restored farmhouse, they placed a small wooden plaque near the fireplace. It did not mention battles, or armies, or politics. It contained only one sentence. A letter found its way home. There is something strangely powerful about letters. Unlike monuments, they are not written for history. They are written for one person, one voice speaking to another. They preserve ordinary moments that official records never capture. The sound of church bells, the memory of an apple tree, the fear of being forgotten. Wars are usually remembered through maps, treaties, and casualty numbers. But sometimes the most important part of history fits inside a single envelope. The letter did not change the outcome of the war. It did not save a life. It did not alter any battle. What it changed was memory. And memory is often the last thing that survives. We often imagine history as something distant, something made by famous generals, presidents, and governments. But history is also made by people who never became famous. Teachers, farmers, nurses, carpenters, young couples who planned weddings that never happened. The greatest tragedy of war is not only the lives that are lost, it is the ordinary futures that disappear with them. Lucas and Anna were supposed to grow old together. They were supposed to argue about small things, repair a leaking roof, watch their children run through the garden. Instead, their entire future became a box of letters beneath a bed and one envelope inside a wall. Whether every detail of this story can ever be proven is no longer the most important question. The letter existed, the waiting existed, the loss existed. Across Europe, thousands of families experienced the same silence. Many never received a final message. Many never learned what happened to the people they loved. Some are still searching today. Perhaps that is why this story resonates so deeply. Because it reminds us that behind every missing name in an old archive, there was once a real person who hoped that someone, somewhere, would remember them. Lucas believed that walls could preserve words. 78 years later, he was right. The letter finally arrived. Not in time, but home. Thank you for watching. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing. Because sometimes the quietest voices from history are the ones worth hearing the most.